All right, so today we're diving into something huge. A massive legislative spring clean, really. We're talking about India's Industrial Relations Code of 2020. This isn't just a minor update, it's a complete rewrite of the entire playbook for how work works in India.
So that's the big question, right? Why would you tear up a rule book that, in some parts, is almost a century old? To get that, you really have to understand the problem this new code was designed to fix.
So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with that century of tangled laws. Then we'll look at the new code meant to modernize it all. We'll cover the new definitions for work, the new rules for unions, the new deal on layoffs, and finally, what this big balancing act really means going forward.
Okay, first up, that century of tangled laws. You see, before 2020, the system wasn't just a system. It was more like a messy, complicated patchwork of rules built up over decades.
Think about this. For nearly 100 years, the whole relationship between employers and employees was run by three different, pretty old laws. You had one from 1926, another from 46, and a third from 47. Imagine trying to run a modern business or protect your rights using three separate rule books, each written for a totally different era. It was complex, to say the least.
And that huge mess brings us right to the solution. A really bold move to just overhaul the whole thing and untangle that web once and for all.
You know, at its heart, the Industrial Relations Code has one single primary mission. Take those three separate, clunky old acts and mash them together into one single, streamlined code. The whole idea was to drag a century of laws into the 21st century. So, just like that, those three foundational laws, the Trade Union Act, the Industrial Employment Act, and the Industrial Disputes Act, were all rolled into one. Three rule books became one. Simple as that.
But this wasn't just about combining old texts. The code actually rewrites some of the basic language of the workplace. It's basically creating a new dictionary for a whole new era of work.
Now, this might seem like just one word, but the shift from workman to worker is actually a pretty big deal. It's a subtle change, but it makes the law much broader. It signals a move to include all kinds of jobs in the modern economy, way beyond the traditional factory floor. The code also gets a lot clearer on what legally counts as an industry. It now specifically says that organizations doing charitable, social, or philanthropic work are excluded. This creates a really clear line in the sand, separating nonprofits from for-profit businesses under this law. All right, next up, unions. The code completely redraws the map for collective bargaining, changing the fundamental rules that define the power and the structure of trade unions. And this leads to a new kind of winner-take-all rule for union power. If a single union wants to be the only voice for all the workers, the official negotiation union, it now has to prove it has the support of at least 51% of them. That's a high bar. And it's set that way on purpose. So how does that actually work? Well, it's a two-step process. First, the question is, does any single union have that magic 51%? If the answer is yes, boom, they're the sole negotiator. Easy. But if no one hits that number, then you move to Plan B. A negotiating council gets formed. This council is made up of reps from any union that has at least 20% support. It's a system that makes sure there's always a clear way to have a conversation. The code also tightens up the definition of what a strike actually is. Now, it includes something called concerted casual leave. Basically, if half the workers or more decide to take casual leave on the very same day, that can now be legally classified as a strike. It's designed to close a loophole where a mass sick-out could shut things down without officially being called a strike. Okay, let's get into one of the most talked about, most debated parts of this whole reform. And that's the new deal on layoffs, which really tries to walk a fine line between giving employers more flexibility and creating a new kind of safety net for workers. So this is a brand new idea brought in by the code. It's called the Worker Reskilling Fund. The whole point is to build up a pot of money to help workers who've been laid off learn new skills and get back on their feet. It's a very forward-thinking idea, acknowledging that jobs disappear and people need help adapting. So how does this fund get its money? Well, Anytime an employer retrenches a worker, they have to contribute an amount equal to 15 days of that worker's last drawn wages into this fund. So there's a direct connection between a layoff and reinvesting in the future workforce. But, and this is a really important but, there's a major clarification here that gives employers more flexibility. The code is very clear. When a fixed-term contract just ends, that is not legally considered a retrenchment. So a worker whose contract simply expires isn't entitled to that reskilling fund payment. That's a huge deal for businesses that rely on project-based or seasonal work.
So you put all these pieces together. What does it all mean? Well, what you're really looking at is one giant, complicated balancing act.
And you can see all the trade-offs right here. For workers, you get this new reskilling fund, but the rules on what's considered a strike are much tougher. For employers, you get more flexibility with contracts, but you have to pay into that new fund. And for unions, you get a clearer path to being the main negotiator, but that bar is now set way higher at 51% support. Everybody gains something, but everybody gives something up.
Which leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? Is this new rulebook going to be a catalyst for growth? Is it a new, stronger safeguard for workers in a modern age? Or is it just an uneasy compromise that doesn't quite make anyone happy? Honestly, only time will tell how this huge experiment really plays out on the ground.